All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Let's see. Looks like we have a few people in, and more will be joining, I'm sure, as time goes on. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here at our storytelling and learning gathering, produced by the training, learning, and development community. Really appreciate your participation today. If you can, if you are logged in, if you can just type in chat where you're logging in from. Really appreciate it. It's nice to see where everybody is coming from, and as well as make sure that the chat is working for us. So if you can, just type that in there. I also want to apologize because the last couple sessions were canceled. Yeah, it's just, I think that's sort of the way that things are going right now. I know for this year in particular, I've seen some churn in sessions. Just as soon as that session time comes around, I'm just seeing more cancellations than I've seen before. And I think it's probably just the state of things, maybe. I know that people have told me that they're having some trouble with productivity and doing things like that, but we'll just power through all of that. And yeah, I'm not going to stop producing these sessions. So hopefully we'll just keep meeting up regularly like this. Excellent. Okay, Nicole from Alaska, Angela, Texas, Elizabeth, welcome back, Elizabeth, Las Vegas, Klaus in Copenhagen. So great to have all of you here. Thank you for being here. All right, I'm happy to introduce you to my friend Kim Lindsey. Kim is an award-winning instructional designer and writer with over 25 years of experience creating effective learner-centered content across industries. Known for her empathy, creativity, and ability to see through the learner's eyes, Kim designs training that truly supports learning and meets business goals. Kim has been an incredible supporter of TLDC through the years, and I'm so happy to have her once again here on the screen with us. Kim's talking about how stories help scientists succeed. And with that, Kim, I'm going to go ahead and hide myself from the screen and let you take over.
Okay, thank you so much, Louise. Hi, everybody. Wow, we're international and north and south and everywhere. I'm excited to share with you. This is a case study of a course that my company did a few years ago. So let me present my screen, entire screen, and this one, and share. So you should be seeing this right now. So I work for a company called Cinecraft Productions. I've been there 15 years. We are in Cleveland, Ohio, but we have remote employees scattered hither and yon. And we are a boutique a training firm. We provide training products, usually e-learning and or video, to businesses who need something a little extra, or maybe who don't have an internal training department. They come to us, and we have wizards. We have a team of experts, and I'm referring to notes over here because I had a little technical difficulty myself here, so I have two laptops going. I appreciate your patience with me today. But for us, an instructional design, it comprises like beginning with a needs analysis. We help with that. We help with the learning strategy. Partly that's in our statement of work, so it's defined up front for the client. But once it really gets going after the kickoff meeting, that's where instructional design begins. Then we would do outlining. I would do outlining. And then I would write usually a storyboard or a script. And my role is writing. At Cinecraft, instructional design is a writing role. Because then after that, we have wizards, we have graphic designers, we have animators, we have custom photography, we have full video production. Right now, we have a team down in North Carolina shooting a course that I wrote the storyboards for. And then it passes over to our developers who can publish in any authoring tool for any LMS or no LMS, whatever the client needs. So, but my role is very much focused on the writing. And I would like to say up front that if you have questions about how the course was built or how the animations were done, I really have no idea what my role is, just the stories. So that does fit our goals here today really nicely. And hopefully somebody from my team, if there's interest, can participate in another TLDC event and talk about how it was built. Let's see, for 15 years, I've been at Cinecraft, and what we're going to talk about today is a case study for that we did a few years back, and this screen is actually the menu for the course. This is the this is the menu. It was very, very fun. This course won a Gold Brandon Hall Award, which is judged on business success and not just on design. And that is also why I am able to share it with you today, because if it had not been submitted for an award, of course, that would break client confidentiality. And so I'm very happy that we did that. And I'm even happier that we won a Gold Brandon Hall Award for our client. Like as I said, my role is writing. I do not have a handout for you today, since this is a case study. Making notes on my particular case study probably wouldn't help you. But towards the end, we'll go through some tips and some takeaways for you. And in the Q&A, maybe we can even brainstorm together, if there's time, of how you can implement these kinds of ideas. This course is very sophisticated, e-learning with animated videos and stuff. But you can use these stories principles no matter what. You can use it for instructor-led training, for a drip program, for anything, because stories are always applicable. So, and this is where I need to change to another screen, because it's not going to let me share a video with you. And let's see. Share screen, and that is this, and share. So this is actually the trailer. It is an animated trailer that we made. Like, wow. It's every time I look at it, just makes me so happy to have been able to be part of a project that is so cool like that. So this one, and share, and we're back to, I'm going to get past that because it won't share correctly through Crowdcast. So anyway, our client was, as you could see, one of the major pharmaceutical companies, international, a real player in that industry. And the story was that the FDA had just released a new guidance on patient-focused drug development, or PFDD. And let's see, let me get down to my notes here. Whoops, wrong computer. Patient-focused drug development means when you're thinking of which drug to develop and to bring to market, or how you're going to do it. What will the drug studies look like? How will you keep records? How will you keep track of things? That they want the researchers at all levels, PhD scientists, medical doctors, everybody, they want to think of the patient first because it will enable them, the FDA is letting them know this will enable you to get approved faster because you will have what you need, because it should be about the benefit to the patient first and foremost. And the researchers would want that too. This would mean a big culture shift at a company because it is different. And if when you're dealing with teams of researchers who have been successful, they need to be motivated to change. And so that is what our client wanted. They wanted a course that would not only tell their learners what PFDD is, what is in that guidance, what are the processes that are new, what is the terminology that is new, but also why, building that motivation and how to implement it. So that was in our course. And this is a ton of content. The audience was our research teams. As I said, PhD scientists, medical doctors, clinical research nurses, statisticians, even to lab assistants, clerical workers, people who sign people up for a drug study, people who interact with hospitals and doctors and insurance companies about these kinds of things. So we had a broad audience. We had a little bit of an ace. I had personally a little bit of ace in a hole because before I was at Cinecraft and before I did 10 years as a technical writer. And before that, I had 17, 18 years working in a hospital clinical science laboratory. So I could understand what the source content was. I couldn't talk like a research scientist, but at least I could understand, and it really gave me a head start. That kind of domain expertise gave me a head start when I was studying. And my method is to study first. I've talked to Patty Shank, PhD, the leader in our field, and she told me, yes, there are two methods that instructional designers use. One is to learn as you go and write as you go, and the other method is to study, 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 and then write. We have a contract writer who works for Cinecraft. She uses the first method. I use the second. And it's funny, we get to the finish line at the same time because she's gathering speed as she goes, but I am waiting, I'm studying, but once I start writing, I'll have fewer revisions. So I was very encouraged when Patty Shank told me that my method was valid. It's actually the one that she uses. So anyway, I did have a little bit of an advantage on this project. And here, let me go over to my notes again and try to keep track. In healthcare, there is a lot of jargon, a lot of acronyms, and there were even more with this new guidance. And all of that needed to be in the course. And it all needed to be in the course also in a way to make it believable and relatable for these audiences, because if it didn't ring true, it's not going to have credibility, and they won't put it into practice. And I am going to try during our session to not lapse into the jargon. I had forgotten it all, and then studying for my presentation today, I started having all of the acronyms and everything coming back into my mind. So no, we need layman's terms because we are learning and development. So if I start to go astray and use words that you don't understand, I guess put something in the chat and I will try to see it. But when they're developing drugs at any pharmaceutical company, they have a process that they go through. Oops, I was supposed to have said that. There are behavior and cultural change means stories. Stories we know, stories, scenarios, simulations. And this is very content heavy. So it was 90 minutes total seat time. It was broken into 11 short modules. One of them was only 5 minutes, which really fit into the work schedule of these busy research professionals very nicely. Let's see, and I'm sorry, I'm not a very experienced presenter, but I'm here among friends, so I appreciate you guys. When they go through drug development, there are different phases that the drug goes through. In order from the beginning of when they're just starting to plan, and then through their trials, and then all the way to what do you do when it actually goes to market. Thanks, Christy. And our course followed this process. Our stories followed it through from beginning to end so that we can show the learner at each point. This is actually an enormous PDF job aid that we made for the client. And in each phase, these are phases or stages, and sometimes the word changes and with different companies, but I'll call them phases. And how will the patient help us? How will we record the data? What are the short-term benefits for the patient? What are the long-term benefits for the patient? And so our audience, especially the team lead, could go and look at this enormous PDF. Okay, I'm at this stage. How can I involve the patient? And it will give them tips and ideas. We also made, which I cannot show because it's on our client's system, but there was an interactive version of this PFDD Navigator, and where the researcher could actually click different items and assemble them into a process flow for how they wanted to use PFDD in their team's development process. And so they could essentially make their own flow and then download it and print it. So I have no idea how we made that. We have wizards, but that was kind of awesome. What I also wanted to say is that these columns, the different stages, are actually the course menu because it went right along with that. So using it this way made it relatable in the real world. It shows how PFDD applies in each phase. That navigator only contains the tips and the high points. There's a ton of stuff in that guidance. And let's see, the next thing is, so our approach, needless to say, is stories. Now, since there's so much content, and since this was at that time brand spanking new from the FDA, we felt that scenarios would not be the way because learners would just be guessing. At every point, they would be guessing, and that's 90 minutes of guessing. That's not maybe the best. So we decided to use, which is kind of unusual, we usually do scenarios. But for this, we just decided to tell stories and embed the content within the stories. So we were illustrating in the stories how PFDD works and what its benefits are and what might the negative consequences be if you did not use it. Then we decided there is a simulation, though, near the end, as you heard in the trailer. So there is one simulation in the course. But we decided to put the knowledge checks having as fact-based. You know, even the knowledge checks throughout the modules, other than that simulation, they were fact-based. They were interactive. There was some multiple choice questions, but a lot of them were drag and drops or matching, something like that, to ensure that the people were learning the terminology and the different factors that can come into play as PFDD is applied. So let's go on to the next slide. The medical condition that that was chosen by the client for the stories is systemic lupus erythematosus, or SLE, or what most of us think is lupus. And It's chosen because the researchers would be very familiar with it. There is a lot of research already done on it. There are a lot of products already on the market with it. Um, it has, it can be illustrated graphically. Not all lupus subsets have the rash, but for these are our patient characters, and you can see that they do have a rash that is associated with the lupus, or that can be. Not all patients have it, but a lot of them do. So that made it so that we could make it a realistic, easily identifiable patient character, because the patients have a role in our stories. It's also is really it was a great choice because demographics play a large part in PFDD, matching your study demographics to the patients who will need your drug. And there's a big difference in the patient base for lupus. As you can see, these are 2 out of 3 of these are people of color. 2 out of 3 of them are younger women. So there, it would be easy, and the research teams would basically already know this because it is so familiar. So we don't have to spend a lot of time up front explaining why PFDD is good for lupus. It will become easily apparent in the stories. So let's go on to our actual stories. And when I went back, when I went back and I counted the stories, I forgot how many that there were, but there's a lot. Our first story starts module 1, right after like an introduction with the planets thing. We start with a story, and this is our older lupus patient, and her doctor is prescribing for her a medication, and she is saying, "What's the name of that medication again?" And this is actually an animated video with the patient talking to increase the relatability and bring it alive for the learners. Help them to empathize with this patient. She's saying, "What was the name of that again? I think I was on a drug study. I never heard what happened. They never asked me about side effects, but I had some side effects. I'm not sure I want you to prescribe that for me." Enormous illustration of the value of patient-focused drug development. Why didn't they get back to her and tell her that the drug was approved? So then she feels like her participation wasn't valued. Why did they not ask her about the side effects? Because that could have really impacted how they developed the drug and how they brought it to market. So this is, in the first 1 minute of the course, a very vivid illustration of the value of the PFDD process. Then our second story is Vanessa, who over here, and she, for the fictional company in actually, I think it was supposed to be our client's company. I think that was in the trailer, but the real lady's name is not Vanessa, but she was my main subject matter expert, and she was brilliant, amazing. I would wish that I could work with her on every project. Not that I don't like anybody else, but she was really fabulous. And so in this story, she was giving a lecture to heads of teams about PFDD and the value that it would have. And please come and see me if you want to implement this in the trials that you are conducting. And here we have one of our other main characters and another one. We have Olivia and Chad, who are down here. Stories 3 and 4 are Olivia's team, who adopt the PFDD approach, and then Chad's team, who prefer a conventional approach. And so they were our skeptic team. And during the course, during each of the modules, as I've said, we would present conversations between the different characters. And we had voiceover even for non-animated characters, where the mouth of the graphic didn't move. We had a different voice for each of the characters. And since our client is international, we covered all the different countries, or many of the different countries and regions of the world that they're in. And we had voice talent that matched the nation that the person was supposed to have been from. And so Vanessa will tell them, and then the team member would ask a question. Well, is this a good idea? And then Vanessa would say yes or no, and she would give information, and then they would tell her how things went, maybe in the next phase, and then she would give further guidance. And this is how the content would be presented in each of the modules. Things would come up, different team members, and these were real job roles within the client's company. And actually, when we were storyboarding, I was just using the acronym for the person's role. I didn't even have a name for the character. Not all of them ended up with names, but they were acronyms until we got to the point where we changed names. And thank goodness for words find and replace. That made that easy. So this is basically, this is just an example of the conversations and how the content was presented throughout the course. Then we had our other stories. We had our other two patients. We had our Shayna here, who was with Olivia's team, the adopter team, and we had Elise, who was the patient that would speak for the group that was in the clinical trials for the Trinley team, or the drug study, Kim, not clinical trials, drug study. Okay, those two things are the same. If I say that again, clinical trial equals drug study, it doesn't really, but it will for us today. But the idea here is, in each phase, we were hearing from Shayna and Elise. What were their good experiences? I really liked that they let me use wear a monitor to track something, and instead of me having to go online and type things. Or I really liked that I could go into my phone and complete a checklist every day, or answer some questions every day, and I didn't have to go to a site. And I didn't, or it could have been a negative thing, like, well, they wanted me to go out and during my work hours and have testing done, or go and see the researcher, and I wasn't able to get off work. So I wish that they would have had hours that were outside of normal business hours, and it would have really helped me to better participate. And these are the kinds of things that the patients would say at each stage along the way. So that those were, and these, once again, like the other one, were actually animated videos where the patient's mouth moved, and just to make it really, really real and make it relatable, to illustrate the value, of course, of PFDD. You guys are going to learn a lot about PFDD today. I'm sorry. Then the stories continued, and as they went on to completion, where they submitted their drugs, either M628 or Trinley, submitted to the FDA, and as you would expect, it's not going to be a surprise, but the Trinley team, yeah, they weren't approved. They had too many patients drop out because they were testing a drug for lupus, and they had signed up a lot of young women of childbearing age, and the Trinley has reproductive side effects. There's a risk. And so they had a lot of people drop out. They had good success with other patients, but they just didn't have enough data. And yeah, if they had thought of the patient first, that might have made a difference. So the learner was able to see at each stage of that drug development process how PFDD can be implemented and the value that it has. But is Trinley done? Whoops, not necessarily, because PFDD can also be used as a rescue or a mitigation to for something that hadn't passed approval the first time. Well, let's assign it to a different team. And we have here one lady who was on the adopter team. And then this is the same gentleman who was on the team that was not successful. But they have a new lead. And this gentleman says, well, we had really good success with our elderly patients who have been suffering from lupus for a long time. They told us that it enabled them to have a lot less stomach upset. They were able to eat better. They had better nutrition. They had better energy and less fatigue. And it really improved their quality of life. Maybe we should recruit older patients and they, and the story goes, and then they were able to do that and bring this drug to market. So it's showing yet another way that PFDD could be beneficial. Then the eighth story is the simulation where the learner is the character. And they were asked a series of 3 to 5 questions for each of the phases. What do you think they should do? And it was difficult. The thing that was difficult for me at that point was that the questions, we had a broad audience, didn't we? We had PhD research scientists, chemists, biologists, biochemists. We had statisticians, we had medical doctors, nurses. We also had lab assistants. We had clerical workers, and how do we write these questions so that everybody would feel that their role was represented, but also so that they're not answering questions that are above their level. So that was definitely a challenge, but we got it done. And so that was our story number 8. But wait, there's more. I'm sorry, I don't have the ding like in the trailer. But we have a 9th story because the narrator throughout our course, his name is Anand, and he has lupus. And so he is what they call an expert patient. And that is such a thing. And a person can go and get certified and trained to interact with, on behalf of patient advocacy groups, interact with pharmaceutical companies, interact with hospitals and doctors' associations, other kinds of providers. So he was telling little bits of his story throughout the course as he was narrating. Let's see. This 2 computer thing is getting me down. I'm sorry. And I did want to point out that many diseases and conditions do have these patient advocacy groups and expert patients like this. So this is a very invaluable thing for the learner to know. You've probably heard of those for Alzheimer's, diabetes, and lupus and other conditions. So that was definitely a real plus to have him. And that was the client's idea. My Vanessa, she was the one who came up with that idea. Let's have a patient be our narrator. And how relatable is that? So in all, we had 9 stories. The learners could go back through the modules, any module that they had completed and take it again. But there were also within the course job aids and other references. There was a glossary. There was that navigator thing. But all of those were also available on the intranet for their use later. So they didn't have to walk through the stories again. We had, when I got done with storyboarding, and we do storyboard in Word, so it is my tool of choice. We created with the client this matrix of characters, and as you can see, they told us what they wanted. Some of them have names, and a lot of them don't. And what their role was. And these were literally roles in the client's company. So I've taken them out because I don't know if I'm allowed to share that. But they specified the demographics, and then we went and got voice talent, and then our artist created the characters to match that. Um, let's see. I should have actually also said, back when we were talking about the conversations, is that because I have a little bit of a healthcare background, which was 25 years ago, um, I could understand it, but I cannot write dialogue. This is literal dialogue in these stories. I cannot write dialogue as if I am a research scientist or I am the head of PFDD for the organization. And that is where I relied heavily on my subject matter experts. I wrote in layman's terms what they needed to say in order to move the story forward. And then I relied on them to polish the actual text, because if it was my layman's terminology, once again, an MD or a PhD would look at the course and it would lose credibility. Perhaps not other people, but we needed that audience. We needed them to learn and be motivated and actually to implement this. So I'm sorry I forgot to say that when we were on that conversation page where I showed Vanessa and the other lady having a conversation. But that was very, very critical. When the client then, when the course was published, the client used the stories and used the characters in promoting the course internally to their company. And of course, this is internal. This is not public facing or even patient facing. This is for their own team members. And so they had on the left, there are those are email banners that could be pasted at the bottom of an email, and it would link to the course. The top right two things are graphics that were on their intranet page, so that once again linked to the course. And then you've already seen the trailer, which was also a big promo for it. And this really, the fact that there were stories and that there were characters really drew people in. And once they actually started Module 1, the fact that it started with that elderly patient saying, "I'm not so sure I want you to prescribe me that drug," that would just draw them in and show them their value of the course immediately. Since we are external to the client's company, we would not have been able to collect the kind of data that Brandon Hall wants for their award process. But our client was amazing. They not only measured completions, they measured knowledge retention and implementation. And since my main subject matter expert was the head of PFDD for the organization, she was able to see how many people are knocking on her door, how many people are asking her and her team for help. She's able to see exactly how this was going. And there were testimonials from different people that were given on the award about how it helped them. The interesting thing, one interesting thing is kind of an anecdote. I personally was talking to a friend at church. I knew she was a nurse. I did not know that she was a remote clinical research nurse for our client's company. And because we had submitted this for a Brandon Hall Award, I knew, okay, I'm not going to be breaking client confidentiality. Even though she works for a client, I still wouldn't have told her. But I said, well, did you recently take a course on PFDD? And her eyes got real big. And she says, oh, that course, it was wonderful. It was so fun. My team is starting to implement it into the drug that we're developing right now. And I was able to say, well, I wrote that course, or I wrote most of it. And she was amazed. But how often does that happen to you? If you're an external vendor and you actually meet somebody who has taken your course and you're allowed to say because of the award process. So that was really it, and I was able to share that internally with Cinecraft. Like, I know somebody who took our course, and it just made us real happy. But then, of course, we did. Our client won, and which means we also won the Brandon Hall Gold Award in 2022 for learning and development. And we're just very, very proud to be able to do this for our client. It is a big feather in their cap, not just because it's fun and it's pretty and exciting, and not even just because it's relatable, but because it was being implemented and they were actually seeing business results. So this proves, come on, conclusions drawn that appropriate and realistic stories are effective in training highly educated associates who work in scientific and technical fields. I would say that if I hadn't had so much help on the dialogue from my client and their subject matter expert team, this course would not have been what it was. So that collaboration was really, really very critical to even the business success and the reception of the course by their employees. It also, I have to say this, in 15 years at Cinecraft, is by far the funnest course that I worked on. And I think it's just because I felt like I had a little inside knowledge, and that I could understand. I could understand the actual FDA guidance, all these pages and pages of stuff. And then there was a consulting company that gave us hundreds of pages of more stuff. And I could understand it. I couldn't convincingly talk about it, but I can understand it. Yes, I can read the ingredients in the back of the shampoo bottle. That is not a problem. It's also not very important, but sometimes those little strengths that we gain along the way, they can come in handy for projects. So I once again, kudos to my absolutely wonderful client side team. They were super smart. And the fact that they were able to see from the actual learner's point of view, because they probably had recently been in those roles, that was absolutely, absolutely critical. So I just have a few takeaways that I thought of for you. And that is using stories versus scenarios versus simulations. And there is a place for all of them. I mentioned before, we typically do scenarios because that is essentially practicing behavior as simulations, either advising someone else what to do or making choices to do it yourself. We did have the one simulation, but when you have 90 minutes of highly technical information and it's new and there's no way the learners can already know, scenarios would not have been the best choice. So I would encourage you, if you have anything like that, to try stories. Try using just stories. Make sure they're relatable, and then you can put your fact-based knowledge checks in to ensure that learners are actually glomming on to that content. And then to rely on your subject matter experts for help when writing realistic dialogue or even the background information. And that is everything I have for you. And now I am open for question. So I see that I have one question. How long did the entire ID process take? I think it was someplace between 4 and 6 months, maybe more like 3 or 4 months. The guidance from the FDA was still kind of in development, and so the terminology and stuff was a little bit in flux. And there were some rewrites because of that, because they wanted it to be exact and spot on. Um, Once again, for credibility, and the learners were going to have to use that terminology. So someplace between 4 and 6 months for writing the storyboard, and then several months more for the animations and the graphics to be approved, and then assembling, recording the voiceover from the different talent, because several years ago, and we and our client were not using any robo voices or AI at that point, so it was all real people. And then the development and sending it to market. I think that navigator thing, that interactive one, I think somebody worked on that for probably over a month, just to get it active, because that is pretty fancy coding right there. We don't often do things like that. Um,
Kim, I do have a couple questions from Christy in the QA area. You want me to read those out to you?
Absolutely.
All right. And forgive me if you went over these already, but how did you track the character details for continuity across all of the stories? This is a lot of
Mm.
characters and details to track.
Uh, it actually it wasn't too bad, because remember, we had a real disease, we had lupus, and we
Mm.
had people in actual real job roles. So at this phase, what would this person be contributing to the whole? And I did, of course, rely on my subject matter experts, because these people work with them. And so they know what the job descriptions are for their company. I had no idea. But it was there were, I don't know, the story kind of controlled the continuity, if that makes sense. I don't know. Does that make sense, Christy? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that really, if it was more of a soft skills type of a thing and you had this many characters, I think it would be much harder to keep that continuity, and even the tone, following up someone's tone as they're disappointed, now they're more hopeful, and keeping track of that. I think that would be much more difficult, to do a big project like this on soft skills, as opposed to the technical kind of stuff that we had. I never actually thought of that before. Great question.
Yeah, excellent. And here's another one from Christy. How many reviewers did you have for these stories? Did you have to deal with conflicting feedback from reviewers for this kind of technical content, getting the wording just right?
This is once again where I have to say, I cannot say enough for, the real world Vanessa, because she was easy to work with,
Mm.
but she was very firm, and she was a true expert. And she was basically the gatekeeper. She had been with the client company for a long time, so she knew their corporate culture. She wasn't going to mess up on that part, but the technical part, she was basically, when I would send something over, she would review it with the team, and the team was not that large. It was maybe 5 or 6 people, and since it was so technical, the learning and development side, those couple of stakeholders, they were more, looking at it from a corporate viewpoint and a messaging viewpoint. They were not looking at the technical details. So my real world Vanessa and, her team of 4 or 5 people, they would just collaborate. And I don't remember receiving any conflicting feedback or anything that wasn't clear, which, when does that ever happen? So, yeah.
Let's see here. And I think back in chat, oh, another one from Christy. How do you define the difference between scenarios versus simulations? Stories are
That's
non-interactive by your examples here, but that line between interactive scenarios and simulations is squishy.
It is. It very much is. Um, I call this a simulation, because the learner was it was first person. The learner was making the choices themselves for me, I personally would call a scenario where the learner is advising an on-screen character. So now we will take whatever definition our client would like us to use. So I'm not, and I don't even know if we use the words stories and simulations when we were talking, week by week on our meetings for this project. I don't even know if we were using those terms as we went along. Once the approach was approved, then it was more just, okay, these are stories, but we're not going to keep saying that they're stories that we already know that they are. So yeah, that is a squishy area, Christy. There, even the same person can use the words differently sometimes. And as I said, we're just going to follow whatever our client wants to call something. So I guess that as an external vendor, that's kind of an easy button to press. But to me, first person versus third person, um, that's what I would that's how I would define it.
I like Klaus's comment here. This was very inspiring. Thank you. I work in L&D within medical devices myself. We've just started using storytelling in internal and external training. It is indeed very impactful. Thanks again. That's great. That's
That's
great.
great. I see a question from Vicky. And how long did the process take? Did I answer that already? I think I did.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think you did.
Yeah, 4 to 6 months or something like that. But
Yeah.
that's not including the development and the animation and graphics time. So,
Did you say, was there anything that you do different if you had to do it again? I'm not sure if you mentioned that already, but that's just sort of,
if I had to do it
it was such a
again,
big process that I'm just
it
wondering.
it's I don't know. This just seemed like a charmed project to me. I
Hmm.
had such fun with it.
Hmm.
Um, and of course, it's been like, we were creating the course in 2000, and it was released early in 2001,
Okay.
and then won the Brandon Hall in 2022. So it has been a few
Oh,
years back.
yeah.
Um, what would I have done differently? I don't know that I would have done anything differently. I would have
Yes.
probably, I have to confess, I probably wasted a little too much time studying this subject matter because it was so interesting to me. I
Mm.
probably knew it a little bit better than I really needed to. I wouldn't say, it's not like I wasted weeks, but I probably wasted a couple of hours because I was just
Yeah.
so intrigued.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
All right. Well, awesome, Kim. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. I really appreciate it. I think it's a great sort of segue into the next session that we're doing today with Christy Tucker, writing scenarios, compelling characters, and distinctive dialogue.
Yes.
I think that fits really, really well. So,
I'm
Christy,
very, very excited for Christy's session.
yes, yes.
I would like to thank you all for being here today, and supporting me and supporting Luis and TLDC. This organization has made the biggest difference in my professional career as an instructional designer. I cannot even tell you. I'm not putting my LinkedIn up on there or my email because in 5 weeks from today, I will be retired. Um,
Wow. That's
I am
amazing.
a,
Congratulations, Kim.
I know I'm excited. I plan to still be around TLDC and lurk, and hopefully I'll be able to be more active in the Slack community. But emailing me or connecting with me on LinkedIn will probably not help you. But if you are interested in talking to Cinecraft for anything similar to this or any kind of a project, just cinecraft.com, our website, and we do such excellent work. It's the best job I ever had. I love all my coworkers. They're the best of the best. So I'm just happy and thankful to have been able to showcase us.
Thanks,
Oh,
Kim.
thanks,
Thank you.
Julia.
Thanks so much. I also want to mention tomorrow, we're doing a little D&D playthrough with Keegan, who's actually in the audience right now. Kim is going to be in that one too as a player. I think we have 8 total, and it's I mean, role playing and storytelling, it just really go hand in hand, especially with something like D&D. So
Mm.
don't forget about that one tomorrow. But more importantly, Christy Tucker coming up in about an hour. Please come back. And with that, Kim, thanks again. I'm going to go ahead and
Oh,
close the section out.
thank you
And
so much. See you
yeah,
later, everybody. Bye.
bye everyone.